actually, that article was great, man. And you have a lot of great articles. I'm going to talk about all your articles. If you've not you follow David, please go follow David on LinkedIn. He has some great articles. There was one you talked about personality types, and there's one statement there that stood out to me, and I'm going to read it out. It said, being introverted and extroverted are both normal. Today's workplaces require both introverted and extroverted leaders to maximize value and create a feeling where people can belong when they are themselves. I really love that statement. That statement actually really resonated with me in so many ways. I just wanted you to talk about that. Why aren't leaders actually making feel both introverted and extrovert feel normal, and that both can add value?
Yeah, I mean, when I started my career, one thing I struggled with, I was lucky when I started my career that almost immediately I had the opportunity to do a Myers-Briggs assessment. So I knew from an early point in my career that I was introverted, but I had no idea what that meant. I had no idea how that would apply to my work environment, how I needed to adapt to my work environment. I really had no idea. And there was nobody there to kind of help me figure that out. So I spent 30 years trying to figure that out. And thinking back on it, there's got to be a much more efficient way to do it. And that's part of the reason why we created the quiet leadership group that we did, was so people can learn, get together and learn from each other, and you can shorten this experience time. But early in my career, I often felt like there was something wrong with me. I would get this feeling, I'd have to do a presentation, and I get these feelings that often resembled pain, or anxiety. For me, it often resembled physical pain. And I would often think that, why do I feel this way? What's wrong with me? And it took me a long time to understand that there's absolutely nothing wrong with me. And those feelings that I had were normal for me, and normal probably for about half the population, maybe to differing degrees. But it's okay to feel that way. And once I really embraced the idea that it's normal and I shouldn't be worried about it, it made it much easier to deal with. I still get those feelings today. I'm talking to you on the computer here today, and I still feel that way. I'm having that anxiety, those pains, but that's who I am. And I guess I've gotten used to that, but I've moved away from this idea that there's something wrong with David, and I've moved towards the idea that this is absolutely the normal state for David, and it's what I'm going to do. It's how I'm going to feel, and that's absolutely fine. And I think as a society, we've labeled lots of people. I think labels are not great to start with, but we've labeled lots of people as abnormal. And in reality, there's a spectrum of experiences that everybody deals with. And I'm talking about personality type, but as you stated earlier, you could apply it to a lot of different dimensions of diversity, where normal is normal for the individual, not normal for the population. And we have to respect each person's normal state. But we have a hard time doing that as a population for some reason. But yeah, so me, it's really about this growth from feeling like there was something wrong to me, to liking who I am, to embracing my strengths, to believing that I'm good enough, and trying to help people shorten that time frame so they all don't spend 30 years trying to figure that out.
No, I really love that. So actually, I'm going to tell you a story, right? So I went for a meeting in Midland, and we were trying to get information, and everybody in the meeting was talking, all the extroverts were talking, and I started taking notes. But there was one guy in that meeting, right? He didn't talk about anything. He didn't say nothing. He was just writing down. And when we were done with the meeting, this guy went back to his desk, and he wrote me an email, like some of the things he thought about, some of the things we talked about in the meeting, how we can apply. Actually, all the notes that I took, I threw it away, because this guy says, like, the way he captured the information was really great. And that's one of the things I saw, like, in your email, when, in your article, is find those people's strengths. Because this guy's strength was to just, listen to the room and capture the information as required. That can, because like that note was the best email I've ever got in my whole career. Like, I've been in the industry for almost 15, 16 years, but I would say that's the best email I ever got. So let's use people's strength. And I think that's just one of the things to, and you talked about that in in the humility using their greatest strengths and weaknesses. So let's know what their strengths is. Introverts and extroverts use them, and use that to bring value to the organization. So I really love that. Also, just to piggyback on the humility one, there's another article you wrote talking about humility. It can be both simultaneously the introvert's greatest strengths and weaknesses. And you talked about the story with your dad, right? How your dad taught you to be humble, do great work and all that. And what has that taught you? Because another thing you wrote in that article is the difference between humility and modesty. And I just wanted to talk about that article because I really loved reading it.
Yeah, so my dad recently passed away. He passed away in March, and so a bit of it was an homage to my dad as well. Oh, thank you. So a bit of it was a homage to my dad, but talking about my career, one of the things early in my career I really struggled with, and I didn't understand why, was talking about my work. Like we would be in a meeting with our supervisor, like a weekly meeting or a biweekly meeting, and we would go around the table and really give an update to the leader and to each other about what we were working on. And I was always prepared for that meeting. I knew what I was working on. I was working on some good stuff. I had good content to share. But when it came time for me to share it, I had these feelings once again. And I had this inherent feeling that by me sharing or me talking about my work, I was doing something wrong. And I didn't know why. But I knew at my core, as a core value, I felt like it was wrong. And it took me a long time to kind of in deep soul searching and deep introspection to figure out kind of what was going on. And I'm not blaming my dad by any stretch of the imagination. If you read my article, you'll realize that. Mm-hmm. But what my dad taught was this sense of humility. And the way he taught it was he taught us that it was wrong to toot our own horn. Basically, it was wrong to talk about or brag yourself, to be arrogant. And I interpreted that, and that was as I was growing up, that's what I was taught. It was wrong. Now, he never taught us to shy away from our accomplishments. He never taught us to be afraid to go out and try things. It was really this idea that if you're successful, you don't need to be, rubbing it in other people's faces. But I interpreted that as I shouldn't be, for some reason, I interpreted that as I shouldn't be talking about my work, that it was wrong to do so. And as I learned more about myself later in life, I realized that talking about your work is not right or wrong. It's not good or bad. In fact, sometimes it's a necessary part of your job to talk about your work, and it's really, really, it's really needed. But I had to get to that point where I realized it wasn't right or wrong. And part of it, as I was doing research for the article, it was learning that, it wasn't humility that was really holding me back. It was the way I interpreted my dad's message of humility and applied it from a modesty perspective. So I became modest instead of humble. And modesty is really what was affecting me more so than humility. And so the whole article is kind of a play on the Matrix, something from the Matrix. But at the end of the article, it basically said is humility can definitely be an introvert's greatest strength. It's not their greatest weakness. But if you interpret it incorrectly, like I did, and you apply it and you become modest, and it affects the way you communicate about your work, it can definitely become your greatest weakness. I love that article. I actually enjoyed it. And like I said, I really connected with it because it had, it came from the heart. It came from my experience with my dad. And I did the artwork for it. So like I said, it all ties into the Matrix. So I had a lot of fun with it. So.
Nah, seriously, when I first read it, because I was one of the people that got to first read it, and that story was what connected me to the message, actually, because I really, really loved it.